One of the greatest business books that's ever been written opens with a story about a young African American girl who is the daughter of a sharecropper. Now this sharecropper, the mom, she speaks to the daughter and she says, I want you to go to the owner of the land and I want you to ask him to send my 50 cents. Now, the little girl, she says, okay, Mom, I'll do it. She goes to the warehouse, and as she gets there, she pulls back the door, walks in. He's there doing his work. He notices that she's there, and he looks up and he says, what do you want? And she says, my mammy says you need to send her 50 cents. And the man says, well, I won't do it, so scram. And she says, yes, sir. But she did not move an inch. Now, the man who's telling the story is the nephew of the uncle who's the owner, and he said that he thought that he was about to witness a murder at this time because, obviously, children didn't speak to adults that way, but especially African Americans didn't speak to this man this way. So anyway, the man says to her, he says, now, I just told you to leave. Why are you still here? Get out of here before I take a switch to you. And the girl says, yes, sir. But she doesn't move an inch. The man picks up a barrel stave. He starts running at her as fast as he can. She still doesn't retreat. She takes one step forward. As soon as he gets 3 feet away, she takes one step forward, looks him dead in his eye, and says, my mammy says she's got to have that 50 cents. And he stopped. He put the barrel stave down. He dug into his pocket. He pulled out 50 cents, and he gave it to the little girl. Now, the little girl, she never took her eyes off the guy. She backs out, nice and easy, and then she goes on her way. Now, the nephew who saw all of this happen, he had no clue how this happened. However, what he says is his uncle, went over to the window and stared out the window for 30 minutes, pondering the whipping that he had just taken from this little girl. He didn't understand it himself. However, he said that he used the principles from that little girl to become the best insurance salesman of his time. What did she have? She knew what she wanted, and she had the determination to never leave until she got what she came for. There is a story, a poem, by a mystical Muslim poet named Hafiz. And he lived hundreds of years ago. I don't know exactly how long, but he lived hundreds of years ago. And he has a poem, it's called Dropping Keys, and it talks about how this little girl could become the biggest person in the room, even though she was the smallest person in the room. So it opens up by saying, the small man builds cages for everyone he knows. But the sage, who has to duck his head when the moon is low, like he's not small, he's so big that he might bump his head on the moon if the moon just happens to be low like it was last night. So the sage, who has to duck his head when the moon is low, he keeps dropping keys all night long for all the beautiful, rowdy prisoners. Now here's the contrast. The small man is constantly making other people feel small. But the big woman, the big person, they're so big that they might bump their head on the moon like this little girl. They're constantly giving out keys and liberating other people. You see, the danger of thinking small is that we compel other people to think and live small as well. The magic of thinking big is that we call people out of their shell and help them to ascend to all of their beauty, to all of their majesties, to all of their strength, and to all of their power. That's the magic of thinking big. Today, I want to speak with you about living into your largeness. Living into your largeness through three ways. The first way is dreaming big. The second way is getting a new image for yourself, or what I like to call stretching your psychological stature. And the third way is following your passion, or following your dreams, or following those intuitive nudges that you get from inside, or from the universe, or from wherever you like to think that they come from. So let's start out with dreaming big. You guys ready? Okay. So some of you, if you were at Ascension Over Depression, one of my workshops, you might have heard this story, but there was a guy who had just lost his job. He's in his mid-20s. He had just lost his job, and he's starting to get depressed. He's got a third kid on the way. He has no money. He has no idea how he's going to provide for his family. And his wife really sees all the turmoil that he's in. And so she gets this book called The Magic of Thinking Big. And she slips it to him and says, "Hey, why don't you read this?" So he's like, okay. So he reads this book. In the book, it suggests that you write down this exercise, that you write down. You throw off impossibility and you write down all the things that you want to accomplish in your lifetime, regardless of how ridiculous you think that they are. So he's like, okay, I'll take you up on this. He writes down 107 things. One of them was, I'd love to meet the Pope one day. Another was, I want to go to the White House and meet the president. Another was, I'd like to become the head coach of Notre Dame. The other thing he said is, I want to win so many championships and, this, that, and the other. Now, these things are all impossible for a 25-year-old kid who's just lost his job. He's depressed, and he doesn't see himself as having any opportunities or any possibilities. But he just went ahead with the exercise. In 1999 or 2000, something like that, he had already accomplished over 100 of those things. And one of the things was even a hole-in-one. He'd gotten 2 holes in one, and he became the head coach of Notre Dame. We're talking about the legendary football coach, Lou Holtz. This was the beginning of his story, when he was depressed and had nothing, and his wife slipped him this book about changing his mindset. The magic of thinking big. My brother is an artist, and when he graduated from Virginia Commonwealth University, he says to me, I don't ever want to work for anybody. And I'm like, man, how's that going to work out for you, man? I mean, man, artists already have it hard. And so for the past 20 years, he's, done T-shirts and CD covers and murals and paintings and all kinds of stuff, just living the life of the struggling artist. But this last year, a company gave him the rights to reproduce their multi-million-dollar company in Philly and take it all the way to Oakland. And so he did that, and Whole Foods paid him $40,000 for one massive mural that he did on the side of the wall, and that wasn't even his biggest project. He had about 7 projects paying that kind of money, getting paid for one painting, more than many people get paid in a whole year. $45,000, $75,000 for one painting. But it started with his vision. He said he didn't want to work for anybody. And now he is the CEO without any attachments to the other company. They said, you just take it and run with it. Take our idea and run with it. Do something new. They just gave it to him. But it started with his vision. I don't want to work for anybody else. I want to be a CEO. I want to be the boss. And now he is that. Now he's got, for the first time in his life, he has employees and these kinds of things. It's a massive shift for an artist. So Shel Silverstein has a poem called Listen to the Mustn'ts. And it says this. It says, listen to the mustn'ts, child. Listen to the don'ts. Listen to the shouldn'ts, the impossibles, the won'ts. Listen to the never haves, then listen close to me. Anything can happen, child. Anything can be. Isn't that beautiful? Doesn't that give you goosebumps just hearing it? Anything can be. But we don't always hear this, and so we have to learn how to remind ourselves not only to dream big, but that we can accomplish the things. And it doesn't matter if we fail along the way. We put those wings on, as she was talking about, and we just get out there. It doesn't matter if we drop. Doesn't matter. It's just life. Do it as a kid when we're learning to walk all the time. So that's the first thing, is learning how to dream big. Get a new vision for your life. Now we're going to move in and transition into the second part, which is getting a new image for yourself, or what I like to call stretching your psychological stature. And so I'm going to tell you guys about one of my favorite cartoons. It's called Kung Fu Panda. Anybody ever heard of it? Okay. So don't let the name fool you. It packs a heavy punch. But Kung Fu Panda is this overweight, out of shape panda who wants to be a legendary kung fu master. And he doesn't really want to be it. He dreams about it, but he knows that he will never actually become that. But then there is this, through some crazy circumstances of events, the Yoda of the movie, his name is Oogway. He's a turtle, and he points this panda out as being the next dragon warrior to save the Valley of Peace. Okay? And the dragon warrior is the only one who can read the dragon scroll, who can open it and read the dragon scroll. Now, the dragon scroll has all the knowledge. If you don't read this scroll, you don't become the dragon warrior, and you cannot defend all of the Valley of Peace and keep peace from the evil Tai Lung who's coming, who's a tiger, and he's going to destroy all the other animals. Okay? Now, Oogway dies. And now all they have is Po. He's been doing his training, but he knows he's nothing to be able to compete with this tiger who's coming. And so they give him the dragon scroll, and he opens it. And he just can't wait to read it. And there's nothing there. Absolutely nothing. So the town all the animals start evacuating the city because they're like, what are we going to do? Like this, that's it. We don't have the dragon scroll. We don't have a dragon warrior. We're all going to die. We're just going to leave. So they all start evacuating. Poe's dad, who is a goose, I don't know how a goose became the father of a panda. He adopted, obviously. But he sees that Poe's down, and he's like, Poe, do you want me to tell you something special? And he's like, yeah. He thinks he's going to tell him who his real dad is. And he said, do you want to hear about the secret ingredient to my soup that's made my restaurant so successful? And he's like, okay, yeah, I'll hear that. Tell me about it. So he's like, the secret ingredient is, and he goes, nothing. And he's like, what do you mean there's nothing? You don't have like a special sauce or something like that? And he's like, no, there's no special sauce. You don't need a special sauce for something to be special. All you have to do is believe that it's special. Poe pulls back out the dragon scroll and sees that mirror. And he says, there is no secret ingredient. I am the dragon warrior. Oogway wasn't just an old fool. He saw it in himself now. The one mirroring, you can pull it out of other people by speaking life and seeing what they don't see. Like there's an old saying that says, the good archer can hit a target that no one else can hit. But the expert archer can hit the target that no one else can see. Do you see that? Same with a mentor. A good mentor can tell you things about yourself that no one else will tell you. But the expert mentor will tell you things about yourself that no one else, including you, can't even see. They'll call that out of you. And that's magical. You need that. But what's more magical is when you start to see it for yourself. And that's what happened when he reopened this mirror and got to see that. I call that the magical mirroring process, where you get to start to see things in yourself that no one else can see. Real life. I'm in a hospital. I'm a grief counselor. An 85-year-old woman her husband is about to die, and he's on his deathbed. And she's so concerned about how she's going to make it through to, all these things that she needs to learn how to do taxes. She needs to learn how to take care of the house. She needs to learn how to pay all the bills. He didn't leave her any of the passcodes or any of that stuff. And he's on his deathbed, and he says to her, "I see a tiger in you." Now, she's about this tall, little Hispanic woman. She doesn't feel like a tiger, but she never forgot what he said. And she came to our group for 2 years, and she became one of the pillars of that grief group because she had this vision of what her husband gave to her, that I see more strength in you than you see in yourself. And I showed her this picture that you guys have probably seen on Facebook, where the little kitten runs up to the puddle and stops. And when he looks, or he or she looks into the puddle, there's a massive tiger looking back. That's the mirroring process. That's how we have to see ourselves when we come upon our own puddles in life. So that's the second thing. It's getting a new image for yourself, or stretching your psychological stature of what's possible for you as a person. So now we're going to move on to our third transition, and that is, somebody help me. Oh, following your passion. Yes, following your hunches, following your passion, following your dreams. So where was I going to go with that one? Who knows? Let's check the notes. The Alchemist. Who's read The Alchemist? Okay, a lot of readers. Okay, so in The Alchemist, there's a little boy, and he has this dream one night. He's in Spain, and he's a shepherd, and he's told in the dream that if he leaves Spain and he travels all the way to Egypt by himself, he leaves everything behind, he will find there a special treasure just for him. And he wakes up electrified about this dream. And then the doubt set in. And he's like, nah, I'm not going to leave all this stuff behind. I'm not leaving my family. I'm not leaving my sheep. I'm not leaving anything. And so he's walking through the town that day, and he bumps into another key dropper, an old wise man. And the wise man says to him, "I know about the dream that you had last night." And the boy says, "How in the world could you possibly know about my dream?" And he said, "Well, I don't know if you're going to follow it, but if you do, you will find your treasure." And now he's like, wow, he really does know my dream. He's not just some crazy old man. And he says, "Well, how could you possibly know that if I leave, then I'll find my treasure?" And he says the famous line that has spread around the world 1,000,000 times over: when somebody deeply desires something, everything in the universe conspires with them to achieve it. You can actually bend reality, and the universe will begin to work with you in that way. So, in my story, we were over in California, and when we were over in California, I told my wife, I said, "Hannah, I really want to be a life coach, a speaker, and an author." And she was like, "Okay, well, when we hit the lottery, you can do that." I mean, we couldn't afford to make that kind of a change. And so I said, okay, I had just read The Secret, and one of the things that they say in The Secret is, visualize your goal as if it's already been achieved. And I had seen this work in my life a little bit at certain times, but I said, okay, I want to do it in a bigger way. So I started imagining that we had enough finances for me to be able to hand my resignation papers to my boss. That's what I'm imagining. It's now the fall of 2016, and in June of 2017, I'm handing my resignation papers to my boss. Now, I could have done that any day, but we wouldn't have had the finances to do that. So that's what it was all about. In May of 2017, I had a dream one night that I'm on this massive Navy ship, probably like 5 stories high, and I'm being asked to leap into the water. Now, I know I'm going to put on my wings, as she sung about earlier, and try to make this leap. However, there's something in the water, and I don't want to hit this thing on the way down. And so I'm trying to navigate it, and then I woke up. And when I woke up, I felt as electrified as the little boy in The Alchemist. I was like, oh my God, we've got a massive shift coming. Hannah, we've got a massive shift coming. And she's like, she knows how idealistic I can be, so she's like, please don't quit your job. So I was like, listen, I'll never do anything that's going to put our family in jeopardy, but I'm just saying I've had dreams like this before. I know something awesome is about to happen. And she's like, okay, well, we'll see. 2 weeks later, she gets a job opportunity at Portsmouth Naval Hospital on the other side of the country, basically from Long Beach to Virginia Beach, basically. And that job was paying double anything that we would have gotten out there, that she would have gotten out there. And the cost of living is so much lower in Long Beach as compared to, Virginia Beach as compared to Long Beach, that for us, in a way, it was like hitting the lottery. So I said, don't take the job if it's not a good fit for you. But she said, listen, I'll think about it. So she thinks about it. She comes back a couple weeks later. She says, had you not told me about your dream and about you been so solid on your intuition, I would have said, there's no way that we're moving across the country while I'm 7 months pregnant for a new job. It's not going to happen. However, since you told me about your dream and you were so solid on your intuition, I am going to take this job, and if you would like, this would be the perfect time to write your book and do all of this. And she said, I only have one stipulation for you. I said, what's that? She said, you've got to take care of the baby. And I was like, we've got a deal type thing. However, on the way across the country, we stopped at her brother's house, my brother-in-law's house, and we stayed the night there. And I had a dream that night, which became the contents of the book that I just wrote last year. I feel, had we not taken that leap, there's no way that I've been able to write a book, but I wouldn't have been able to write that book type thing. So follow your dreams. Follow your hunches, the intuitive nudges. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be the little things that are spoken over your life. Thank you. So at Paula's special request, she asked me to do a poem. I'm going to do a poem. This poem is inspired by Apple's Crazy Ones commercials, where they're kind of listing people like the Dalai Lama and like Mother Teresa and like Martin Luther King and the Gandhi and all of these iconic characters from history, and how they thought differently and how they had to be a little bit crazy in order to become the people that they became. So this poem is inspired by that commercial. Specifically, we overcome every difficulty by taking every thought into the captivity of thinking differently. Subliminally, the image of love influences us mystically and mythically. We tell spiritual stories to one another reciprocally of triumphing mentally and spiritually over every enemy. Here's to the misfits, the foolish ones who think differently. They're not fond of simplicity. They live unconventionally, existing at a different level of intensity. They add elasticity and flexibility to what's inflexibly rigid. bringing warmth to the frigid systems of existence. You can hate them acidically, discredit their credibility, or oppose them ritualistically. Look down on them cynically, say they became great accidentally, rain on them torrentially, or see brilliance academically. You can look and see density, or see a lovely symphony. About the only thing you can't do is disqualify their eligibility. Why? Because they change history. Everything in existence moves them restlessly onto destiny backed by infinity. Their spirit is immensity. They overcome resiliently and follow their hearts existentially. Though they may be misunderstood until the next century, we see their opponents as only minimally convincing, simply for a time. Because in them, there's a tendency for the divine to visit Earth coincidentally. And while some may see misfits and foolishness, we see wisdom and genius. Because the ones who are crazy enough to think they can live and love limitlessly are the ones who actually do. So now it's your turn. For our meditation, there are no limits. I want you to imagine if you could wake up tomorrow or 5 years from now and be who you wanted to be, and there were no limits, like the wife who gave the magic of thinking big to Lou Holtz, and he became all of these things. It doesn't have to be big, but just something that you've always wanted to do and you've never done or become. Who would you be? Think about that person now. I have a poem that says, I keep holding up the mirror of the sun so you can see the stunning reflections of everything you're becoming. Close your eyes, see that person. What would you do? Who would you be? As the alchemist tells us, everything in the universe is conspiring, will conspire for you to become that person.